In this chapter, we're going to discuss about the greatest magic on the earth, photosynthesis. The photosynthesis feeds the whole biosphere on the earth. Photosynthesis is the process that converts the solar energy into chemical energy. In other words, solar energy into our food like rice or bread. Directly or indirectly, photosynthesis nourishes almost the entire living world. Autotrophs sustain themselves without eating anything derived from other organisms. So they don't have to eat any food outside. Autotrophs are the producer of the biosphere, producing organic molecules from carbon dioxide, CO2, and other inorganic molecules. Almost all plants are photoautotrophs, using the energy of sunlight to make organic molecules, photoautotrophs. So the green plants, they don't need anything to eat for the food, but they just absorb CO2 and H2O, and with the sunlight they can produce their own food, their own organic chemicals. Photosynthesis occurs in plants, algae, certain other unicellular eukaryotes, and some prokaryotes. These organisms feed not only themselves but also most of the living world by photosynthesis. Examples of photosynthetic organisms: plants and multicellular algae, unicellular eukaryotes, cyanobacteria. Cyano means blue, that's why blue-colored bacteria, because of the chlorophyll molecule inside those bacteria. And purple sulfur bacteria, they are the example. Hetero means different or others. That's why heterotrophs obtain their organic material from other organisms. So they have to eat others. So heterotrophs are the consumers of the biosphere. Almost all heterotrophs, including humans, depends on photoautotrophs for food and O2, because those autotrophs, they produce food and they release out O2 as byproduct. The Earth's supply of fossil fuel was formed from the remains of organisms that died hundreds of millions of years ago. In a sense, fossil fuel represent stores of solar energy from the distant past. But there are some controversies. So some people say that, but some people, they don't agree though. Photosynthesis converts light energy to the chemical energy of food. Chloroplasts are structurally similar to and likely evolved from photosynthetic bacteria. We already discussed over a little bit. The structural organization of these organelles allows for the chemical reactions of photosynthesis. Chloroplast, the sites of photosynthesis in plants. Leaves are the major location of photosynthesis. Chloroplasts are found mainly in cells of the mesophyll. Meso means middle. So the tissue inside the middle of leaves, we call that the mesophyll. So mesophyll, the interior tissue of the leaf. Each mesophyll cell contains about 30 to 40 chloroplasts. Carbon dioxide, CO2, enters and O2 exits the leaf through the microscopic pores called stoma singuliform and stomata pluriform. A chloroplast has an envelope of two membranes surrounding a dense fluid called the stroma. So that's the, kind of fluid, a thick fluid called stroma. It is covered by two membranes, outer membrane and inner membrane. As I mentioned, before, that two membrane, they are transparent, clear membrane to make easier for the sunlight go through that two membranes. And thylakoids are connected sacs in the chloroplast, which compose a third membrane system. So that's the thylakoids. Thylakoids may be stacked in columns called one granum, more than one grana. Chlorophyll, the pigment which gives leaves their green color. Actually, chloro means green, that's why. So chlorophyll resides in the thylakoid membrane. So chlorophyll pigment, they are embedded in the membrane of thylakoid. This one showing you the structure related to photosynthesis. So inside the plant leaves, upper skin tissue and lower skin tissue in between, we can see mesophyll tissue. Those mesophyll cells inside, they contain chloroplasts inside the mesophyll cell. So inside the mesophyll cell, we can see chloroplast. It is chloroplast surrounded by double membrane, outer membrane and inner membrane. That's the clear membrane. And third membrane system we call thylakoid. Thylakoid, it is because it containing chlorophyll, green pigment, that's why it looks green. And those thylakoid membranes, sometimes they make up a coin stack shape, we call granum, and pluriform, we call grana. And those thylakoid membrane system is surrounded by thick fluid stroma. That's the actual site for the production of sugar. And the picture showing you a diagram and a EM image, TEM image. The photosynthesis is a complex series of reactions that can be summarized as the following equation: 6CO2 with 12H2O plus light energy, it converted into C6H12O6 and 6O2 with 6H2O. As I mentioned before, you don't need to memorize all those numbers, something. If you understand, that's enough. So please just understand the concept. So for the photosynthesis, we need CO2, carbon dioxide, from the air. So they absorb CO2 from the air and water from the soil. So through the root, they suck up water. So with those CO2 and H2O, what we need? Sunlight. So with the sunlight, CO2, they convert it into sugar. So we can have sugar, C6H12O6, that's the glucose. So they can produce sugar. And O2 comes out as byproduct. So as I mentioned earlier, that's the reversed process from cellular respiration. Cellular respiration, we can start from glucose and O2. So glucose and O2 comes out. And H2O, that's just the leftover from H2O. That's all. So just remember, we need carbon dioxide, CO2, and water with the sunlight. And the sunlight energy can be converted into sugar, and O2 comes out as byproduct. So you can remember the concept, that's enough. Never mind the number. The overall chemical change during photosynthesis is the reverse of the one that occurs during cellular respiration. As I mentioned, in cellular respiration, O2 accept electron and accept proton H plus ion at the same time become water. Now, for the photosynthesis, it is reversed. They split water. So chloroplast split H2O water into hydrogen and oxygen, incorporating the electron of hydrogen into sugar molecules and releasing oxygen as a byproduct. So it is completely reversed process. They split, chloroplast, they split H2O and produce oxygen and H plus ion, and electron come out. Those electrons can be used up to make chemical bond in sugar. So in photosynthesis, they need CO2 and H2O with sunlight. And the CO2s, from CO2 is carbon, Carbon gonna become a sugar. And with H2O, from the H2O gonna get split and release out O2, and they release out H plus ion and electron. They release out. Those electrons can be used up, and the proton can be remained as H2O. Okay, redox process, redox reaction. Cellular respiration can be explained by redox reaction. So when sugar get broken, electron gonna come out, electron gonna get received by the NADH and FADH2. Those electron delivery man, they deliver electron to electron transport chain. Then electron gonna get flowed through that electron transport chain. At the end, part O2 receive. And with the energy flow, they make H plus ion pump. Those proton multifolds, they produce ATP. That's what? That's the cellular respiration. But the photosynthesis, it can be explained by another redox reaction. So photosynthesis reverses the direction of electron flow compared to cellular respiration. Photosynthesis is a redox process in which H2O is oxidized and CO2 is reduced. So H2O get broken and CO2, from the CO2 they can build up organic compound, sugar. So photosynthesis is an endergonic process. The energy boost is provided by light. Endergonic means they have to absorb some energy from outside, from sunlight. So never mind endergonic. So it is anabolic. They make up something from simple molecule into more complicated organic compound. In redox process sense, the CO2 gonna get reduced into sugar, C6H12O6, glucose. And H2O get oxidized, so H2O get broken and O2 released out. That's the simplest equation to explain photosynthesis. So never mind the number. So with the sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, they are converted into sugar and O2 released out as byproduct. If you understand the concept, that's enough. We subdivide cellular respiration into 3 stages, but for the photosynthesis, we're gonna divide into 2 stages. First one we call light reaction, and second one is Calvin cycle. So light reaction means they absorb sunlight energy, and after that it occurs something. So that's why we call that the light reaction, indicating sunlight involvement. And the Calvin cycle means through the Calvin cycle, they can produce actual sugar in stroma. That's why we call Calvin cycle, named after the researchers as a scientist. That's why. Actually, Kelvin and Benson. So 2 scientists, they cooperate together, Kelvin and Benson, but sometimes we call Calvin cycle, or sometimes we call Kelvin and Benson cycle. So photosynthesis consists of the light reaction, the photopart. Photo means light, that's why. And Calvin cycle, the synthesis part. The light reaction, it occurs in the thylakoids. Split H2O. They break H2O into O2 and H plus ion and electrons, and release O2. That's the byproduct after breaking O2. And reduced electron acceptor NADP plus into NADPH. That looks very familiar, yeah? Because we already discussed over NAD plus and NADH in cellular respiration. Is that similar? Yes, that's very similar, and their function is about same. Yeah? So the name of NADP is very similar to NAD. Yeah? NAD, what's the name of NAD? That's the nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. And what's the name of NADP? Same, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. The P stands for phosphate. That's why. Phosphate group is attached in addition. Yeah? That's why make up NADP plus. It reduced into NADPH and generate ATP from ADP by photophosphorylation. One more time, photophosphorylation. I want you to remember the term photophosphorylation. So later on, we're going to discuss a little bit more detail about photophosphorylation. I want you to remember. The Calvin cycle in the stroma forms sugar from CO2 using ATP and NADPH. Those ATP and NADPH, they are produced from light reaction. The Calvin cycle begins with carbon fixation. Carbon fixation incorporating CO2 into organic molecule. So CO2 from the air gonna get incorporated into organic compound. So that's why we call that's the carbon fixation. Carbon, those C gonna get fixed into organic compound. So we call carbon fixation. This one showing light reaction. So when they observe sunlight, H2O gonna get split and releasing out hydrogen ion and electron and O2. So O2 release out. And with the light reaction, NADP plus form, they reduced into NADPH. So they carry electron and hydrogen at the same time. Yeah? And ADP turn into ATP by photophosphorylation. Yeah? So they added up phosphate group into ADP, then it is turned back into ATP by photophosphorylation occurs in light reaction. The product of light reaction then means ATP and NADPH. They are translocated into stroma and it can be used up in Calvin cycle. So through the Calvin cycle, CO2, the carbon gonna get fixed into organic compound with the Calvin cycle and produce sugar. And sugar, when they produce, they exit out of Calvin cycle and stay inside the stroma usually. The light reactions convert solar energy to the chemical energy of ATP and NADPH. Chloroplasts are solar-powered chemical factories. Their thylakoids transform light energy into the chemical energy of ATP and NADPH. So sunlight energy, they not gonna produce sugar directly, but first sunlight energy converted into the chemical energy form of ATP and NADPH first. The nature of sunlight, we can just read through, read over, because we're not studying physics, so never mind. And the light is a form of electromagnetic energy, also called electromagnetic radiation. Like other electromagnetic energy, light travels in rhythmic waves. Rhythmic means they moving like a wave, water wave. So wavelength, that's the distance between crests of waves. And wavelength determines the type of electromagnetic energy. As I mentioned, we can just read through, that's all, never mind. So the electromagnetic spectrum is the entire range of electromagnetic energy or radiation. Visible light consists of wavelengths, including those that drive photosynthesis, that produce colors we can see. So we can see it, that's why visible light. And light also behaves as though it consists of discrete particle called photon. Never mind all those things, but remember photon. Photon, that means sometimes sunlight energy, it is described as a small stone. We call that the photon particle. Small, so microparticle, photon. Never mind the whole spectrum of sunlight. Just we can focus on visible light, because some of the visible light can be useful for photosynthesis. Not very important. Never mind. Photosynthetic pigment, the light receptors. Pigments are substances that absorb visible light. Different pigments absorb different wavelengths, and wavelengths that are not observed are reflected or are transmitted. So reflected, mostly reflected, the light, that's the green colored one. That's why we can see reflected light as green. And leaves appear green because chlorophyll reflects and transmits green light. So from the sunlight, some portion of the visible light, they are observed, and the other, they're gonna get transmitted or reflected through the thylakoid. Inside the chloroplast and inside the thylakoid membrane, we can see mainly for the three types of pigment: chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B and carotenoids. Chlorophyll A is the main photosynthetic pigment, and the other one is accessory pigments such as chlorophyll B, broaden the spectrum used for photosynthesis. The difference in the absorption between chlorophyll A and B is due to a slight structural difference between the pigment molecules. Accessory pigments called carotenoids absorb excessive light that would damage the chlorophyll. So they go through the protection, those chloroplasts. Chlorophyll, that's the complicated compound, and between chlorophyll A and B, just a slight difference. The CH3 for the chlorophyll A and CHO for the chlorophyll B. So at the position. And we can see hydrocarbon tail is kind of complicated. So chlorophyll. And the accessory pigments called carotenoids function in photoprotection. They absorb excessive light that would damage chlorophyll. Excitation of chlorophyll by light. When chlorophyll molecule absorbs sunlight energy, the energy level jump up. They jump up into some kind of energy level. So we call they boosted up into excited state from ground state. So again, when a pigment absorbs light, it goes from a ground state to an excited state, which is unstable. When excited electrons fall back to the ground state, protons are given off an afterglow called fluorescence. Sometimes, when energy falling down, the energy can be released out as a fluorescence light. If illuminated on isolated solution of chlorophyll, will fluorescence, giving off light and heat. This one explains that photon, so with the sunlight energy, gonna get absorbed by the heating of photon into chlorophyll molecule, then electron inside the chlorophyll molecule boosted up into excited state from ground state. And those excited state is unstable, so electron gonna fall down back. That moment, the energy gonna get released out as heat or fluorescence light.